All right, we're back. Our guest tonight, Dr. Phil Valentine. We're discussing the abduction and possession of African consciousness. And we know, Dr. Phil, I've heard a lot of theories as far as what we're in terms of what we're dealing with. We have people like a guy named Credo Mutwa, who's a Zulu shaman, who says that this is a reptilian, and I've heard other people speak about this reptilian entity or species that might be the hand behind this. They don't want to give the white man credit for being this insidious, this ingenious to create these kind of lockdown methodologies to constantly keep us in control. Every time we would go up, they come up with a new form of control. What do you feel? I know you even spoke about the fallen lords in your lectures. What's the deal with this whole reptilian, a cold-blooded reptile-like race that has used this white race to do their work?
Well, I've got many stories about that since before David Icke had come on the scene. My understanding of the reptilians were that, and this is the story, the myth, and you have to look at the myth and study the myth and see what the myth is actually saying to decipher what the real, I guess, the kernels of truth that may be inside of the myth.
Right.
The story is, and however these words are used and what they mean analogically, I don't know. But the story is that the reptilian race was a race that run by the feminine principle, the female, supposedly. And it was a race that did not or could not interface with its own dimension and all the life forms on its dimension. And somehow it was teleported or somehow transferred by a higher power into our dimension. And they were cast down. And that the story that we get about the casting down was actually their story that they gave to us. This is the story, and I'm just passing it on.
Sure.
The other story is that there's a mechanized race that supposedly a very secret order called the Labyrinth Group, the Labyrinth Group, which is above top secret, even higher than H-bomb and UFO. And this Labyrinth Group is supposed to be studying methodologies to be able to time travel to a moment where they can intercept a signal that these entities, who are like the Borg, part machine, part humanoid, or part organic, and these entities don't sit down and study or use samples under a microscope. They essentially assimilate you and change you into them, and that's how their consciousness learns. They don't learn by studying you in a second hand. They study you firsthand by assimilating you. And the secret behind the Labyrinth Group is to try to circumvent their noticing signals coming from our point in the universe where they would attack, and definitely based on our technologies, which is why we are creating technologies like HARP and like Tesla technologies and things of that nature, like ASTAT, which is the Europeans' version of HARP. The reptilians are supposed to have come out of the Orion system, which is what we heard.
Mm-hmm.
But I was talking to another gentleman who I had befriended. His name is Riley Martin. And Riley Martin had a lot of materials that Steven Spielberg used, and a number of other Hollywood directors had used information that he had, which eventually came out in a book called The Coming of Tan. And The Coming of Tan essentially was a book that was used from the X-Files, all of these.
Right.
They took it from this book, and I would suggest everybody go up and get that Coming of Tan by Riley Martin. And it was funny because Riley and I befriended Riley, and he was saying about his abductions and so forth. And he described these reptilians as Tarxicians, but they were just essentially part of a gigantic, how do we say it, galactic United Nations. And this Galactic United Nations, the Tarxisians, the Screed, which were an insectilian people, and the Bavarians, which is who Tan was. His name was Okwat Tanjin 1. These are the people that he met when he was abducted when he was 7 years of age. Then again, I believe at 16, and then again at 17 and 18. And he spoke and wrote down this information, gave this information to a colonel in the military, gave pictures in Polaroid. Now, you know you can't fake Polaroid. Back in them days, Polaroid is what you got. Right. You can't fake it. Took the Polaroids he had of the ship and everything that he took of that, and he never saw it again. Now, what he did was he documented his experiences, and at the time, everybody thought he was crazy. Of course, he turned to, alcohol and drugs because the experience and what he tried to relate and the kind of resistance and the kind of vilification he got, it was enough for him, especially as a boy. It did not do well for him. He pulled himself out of it, and he told his story. And he told the story that he was taken up to a moon-like ship that sat off of Saturn. Now listen very carefully, family. This is like 20 years ago, because we had him in 1994 or 5 at our gathering of the masters. And he told us that they took him up at this ship. It was a gigantic moon-like ship. It looked like the size of the moon, circling off of Saturn. And he said that when he was up there, he was given a tour of the ship, and outside he saw all these moons. It must have been about 19, 20 moons, he said. He thought he was about 17, 18, 19 moons. And at the time, the people only saw 8 or 9 moons from where the proximity of where the Earth was. So when they said that he did that, they said, well, definitely he was tripping on some kind of drug. Just 5 years ago, it was discovered, I think it was with Cassini or one of these other spacecraft, they found like 11 to 15 moons up there, and as soon as that happened, he got a call from Washington. And he was told to go down there and give a speech to some professors at some college and tell them what he knew again. This time, we're going to be listening very carefully. On top of that planet information, come to find out that as of, I believe, 2 months ago, all transmissions from the Cassini were shut down and put under top priority, top secret. No more public viewing of anything from the Cassini.
Wow.
And the information that came back was that as soon as they saw this ship-like orbiting situation right there, they shut down all information. And not only did Cassini pick up the ship itself, it picked up a planetoid that was coming in around Uranus, heading in our direction. So what I'm saying is, and I did all of that to tell you that if there are reptilians here manipulating us, they're not the only ones.
Okay.
All right? And what I say reptilian is, as far as that's concerned, the only one that would be manipulating reptilians, be manipulated by reptilians, is white people, because the reptilians can't affect our minds in that way. They can abduct us bodily and so forth, but they choose the paled out European white, blonde, blue-eyed, because they have a way to interface with an inferior or recessive genetic strain.